I'm Trent Roberts, Soil Fertility Specialist with the University of Arkansas System Division of Agriculture. Today I'm going to be talking about some key components of rice fertilization and some things to consider for your rice production system. The first thing, as with any crop, soil testing is going to be a strong foundation on which to build your crop production plan. And that starts with a good, sound soil testing, soil analysis approach. And so with any crop, we want you to focus on getting a good quality soil sample, submitting that to a reputable lab, and then using those results to interpret what type of fertilization you need to maximize not only your rice yield, but your profitability as well. In Arkansas, we have soil tests that will allow us to predict nitrogen needs, phosphorus needs, potassium needs, and zinc needs. And it's very important that we rely on those soil tests to guide our fertilization programs so that we're not over-applying nutrients, but we're also not leaving yield on the table due to under-fertilization. I'm going to shift gears a little bit and talk about some differences that we see between hybrid rice and pure line rice. Hybrid rice has been a part of Arkansas rice production systems for about 15 years. But over the last decade, it's really taken, a bigger step in, making up about 50% of the state's rice acreage on an annual basis. And so with that, we need to put more emphasis on our research and investigation of the nutrient dynamics associated specifically with hybrid rice as it relates to our rice production systems. So there are a lot of things that we know about hybrid rice. It tends to be more vigorous. It tends to have a much more extensive root system, and some of those things allow it to extract nutrients from greater depths. It allows it to take water from a greater bulk volume of the soil, which makes it obviously more drought tolerant. And then the flip side of that is it really impacts how we see potential nutrient deficiencies and interactions with hybrid rice. So one particular study that I want to discuss quickly is some work by one of our master students under the guidance of Dr. Nathan Slayton, where they looked at rice response to K fertilization. And one goal of this was to develop a critical tissue concentration for rice through the reproductive growth stages. An interesting side note that came out of that particular project, or an interesting finding, was that hybrid rice does not respond to K fertilization to the same extent that our pure line rice cultivars do. So for instance, in an area with low or very low soil test K, where we got a strong positive response to potash or K fertilization with the pure line variety, we got no response with the hybrid variety or the hybrid cultivar. And so what that tells us is that there are some differences in the nutrient uptake dynamics and maybe potentially the ability of hybrids to mine soil test nutrients or mine soil nutrients to a greater extent than our pure line cultivars. So just to give you an example, at this same location where we had roughly 60 to 70 ppm soil test K and would have expected a high response to K fertilization, the pure line cultivar, with K fertilization we increased yield by 15 to 20 bushels per acre. Whereas with the hybrid cultivar, K fertilization did not result in an increase in yield. And so that's just kind of a new thing that we've stumbled upon that we want to investigate further. And I think it has a lot of implications for our production systems from the standpoint of, when and what soil test level or value will we start to see a response to K fertilization for our hybrid rice. But then the flip side of that, which concerns me the most, is potentially how much hybrid rice may be mining those macronutrients such as phosphorus and potassium from our production systems. So definitely something we're going to continue researching and hopefully, kind of pinpoint the rate to which hybrid rice is removing K or potassium from our production systems and how we need to better manage it going forward. The second thing that most people are more familiar with is the idea of late season or boot nitrogen applications to hybrid rice. Some of the research we've been doing the past couple years has tried to focus on what specifically that late season nitrogen is influencing or impacting in our hybrid rice production systems. Some of our research has indicated a couple of different things that boot nitrogen application does. One of the biggest things that we found is that boot nitrogen application, kind of regardless of your pre-flood nitrogen rate, increases yield. The second thing that we found with that boot nitrogen application is that it increases milling. So two very important things when we're talking about yield as well as profitability. Particularly with hybrid rice, one thing that we wanted to look at or focus on was where that late season nitrogen or boot nitrogen was impacting our milling yield. And so when we dove closer and looked, we compared the milling of our primary or main stem to the milling yield of our secondary, tertiary tillers on hybrid rice plants. And what we found is that boot nitrogen application increased the milling of all of the tillers on the rice plant. So not only was it increasing the milling of the main stem or the primary panicle, but it was also increasing the milling of all our secondary and tertiary tillers on that hybrid rice plant. Now, one thing we want to continue to look at going into the future is how those rice plants, particularly hybrid rice, are partitioning that nitrogen within the plant, as we think that could become very useful in helping us understand exactly what that late season nitrogen is doing to help optimize not only milling but grain yield production in our hybrid rice cultivars. One last thing I want to leave you with is the importance of zinc management in our cereal crops, especially rice. Zinc is very important for our cereal crops, especially where we have low soil test zinc and high soil pH. Those are areas where we really need to manage our zinc fertilization to optimize yield and productivity. One thing that can be very daunting for producers is when you have that combination of low soil test zinc and high pH, you get a recommendation for 10 pounds of actual zinc per acre. And when you apply that as granular zinc sulfate, it can seem like a very costly component of your fertilization program. But one thing that you'll find is that zinc is going to be critical for optimizing that yield and productivity in all of our cereal crops, especially rice production. And so what we want to encourage producers to do is start taking a more active or engaged role in managing your soil test zinc levels. What we want and what we're hoping for is that producers will start seeing the importance of using that 10 pounds of actual zinc granular pre-plant to help build our soil test levels over time. You know, here recently we've dealt with a lot of situations where we get to that flooding growth stage. We apply our pre-flood nitrogen, and then once we've had the rice crop flooded for a couple days, we start to see a crash due to zinc deficiency. And when you compare the cost of a foliar zinc application in season to 10 pounds of actual zinc applied pre-plant and incorporated, those are roughly the same cost in terms of what you're paying for the product as well as the actual application cost. And really the problem with the in-season application of a foliar zinc product is it's just a Band-Aid. It fixes that problem for that crop, for that season, but it does absolutely nothing to build soil test zinc over time. And so our goal is, if you're going to have to spend that money on zinc, let's spend it in the way that best promotes the long-term sustainability of our production system, and that's through a pre-plant zinc application of 10 pounds of actual zinc as something such as zinc sulfate, because what that's going to do is after 3 to 4 years of using that 10 pounds of actual zinc applied pre-plant, you're going to build that soil test zinc level. And building that soil test zinc level is one of the true ways of thinking of putting money in the bank to use later down the road. Once we have built that soil test level to a degree where we no longer have to fertilize, we can rely on that to help feed our crop for years to come. And with the cost being relatively the same, to me that's the best way to spend your money going forward. As always, I'd like to thank the Arkansas rice producers and the Arkansas Rice Research and Promotion Board for supporting all of our work through the Rice Checkoff. And as always, if you have any questions, feel free to contact us. Thanks.